Hey everyone, it's Hornby here. Welcome back to my YouTube channel here, and I recorded on Boxing Day here, so hopefully you enjoyed your Christmas and holidays with your family and that. And instead of fighting the crowds and I find there's nothing good enough on deals that for me to go shopping, I figured I'm going to go back to make some videos here. And I used to work retail, and I definitely, been in the trenches on the other side for Christmas and Boxing Day shopping, so I figured try to do my part and give them a break here. But anyway, let's go back to my personal blogs here, and as a Calgary sports fan, there's something to recap that's happened in the past here. So personal blog number 59, I'm going to call this one Calgary Baseball Memories here, as lately I've been doing some memories here with gaming here, but let's talk about some Calgary baseball memories here. And as you see here, I have a cap for the Calgary Vipers here, as it's the last, you can say, major baseball team that's played in Calgary. And I'm not too sure if Calgary is ever going to have any kind of major baseball. I mean, obviously we're never ever going to, not anytime soon, we're never going to have a major league baseball team. And also even a AAA team. In Canada used to have, AAA baseball teams, including here in Calgary, which I'll get to shortly which team that was. And I think the last AAA team that was in Canada before eventually moved to the States was the Ottawa Lynx. And because other than the Toronto Blue Jays, who are the only Major League Baseball team in Canada here, there's no other next level. I believe the one team is the Vancouver Canadians, who's still around. They're only a single A team now, but I remember they used to be a AAA team. And so yeah, I mean, there's pockets of baseball I find interesting in Canada, especially in Southern Ontario with the Toronto Blue Jays. But I think the climate and now you also get a lot of baseball players that eventually go to the big leagues that played in the interior, that came from the interior of British Columbia there, as I meant to say. But I'm just going to say, I don't think Calgary is ever going to be a big enough market to get a Major League Baseball team. And if we ever do, we need an indoor stadium, because our weather is very hectic here. And, it could snow all 12 months of the year. And, when baseball starts beginning of April, it can still snow here. And if, hypothetically, I'm just saying, if we had a Major League Baseball team, we went to the playoffs, it could snow in October as well. So there's 5 teams here I'm going to mention, that, including the Calgary Vipers, which is a team that I've watched most baseball here. But there's a lot of other teams that I know existed, and I went to a couple games. But I was much younger, and it was before you made your own decisions to watch games here. But and this is all on Wikipedia here, but I'm just going to go in order of all the Calgary baseball teams that I know were around and existed and are no longer around here. So the first Calgary baseball team that much of the time happened before my time and in my infancy, we used to have the Calgary Expos here. And they were a minor league baseball team, and they played in the Pioneer League, where he playing at the rookie level here. That's what it says on Wikipedia here. And they played at the Foothills Stadium, and all the baseball teams I'm going to talk about play at Foothills Stadium. And now that stadium has no use, and it's dilapidated and falling apart here. That there is actually plans that eventually, if that place is not being used, they might as well knock it down. That they're going to want to build a new field house, which this city also needs, an indoor enclosed field house, so that you can have access to do track sports and that year round there. And that's something that actually a city of Calgary doesn't have. But getting back to the Calgary Expos here, actually they were affiliated with a few teams. For the major leagues, they were affiliated with the St. Louis Cardinals, and there was also the Calgary Cardinals too. So and then they also switched affiliations with the Montreal Expos. So, there was definitely some connections to being a feeder team for the major leagues here. But this is a team that was definitely before my time here and my infancy here. But eventually, this team relocated to Salt Lake City to become the Trappers, to make room for another team that I think most Calgarians have most fond memories for. It highlights a couple notable alumni that played in the Calgary Expos system. You got Bob Bailey, and it says 1979. Don't remember him. And Steve Boros, 1980. Don't remember him, but I definitely remember this player, Andres Galarraga. It says 1979-80, 5-team MLB All-Star, and won the NL batting title in 1995 there, so I definitely remember Andres Galarraga there. I know he started his career with the Montreal Expos. Actually, the Montreal Expos had quite an alumni there. They just couldn't afford to keep them all. And I know he played with the Colorado Rockies and the Atlanta Braves there. So yeah, we had a little bit of history with Andres Galarraga here. So that's all I remember for the Calgary Expos here. But they moved to Salt Lake City when we had the Cannons, the Calgary Cannons here, which they were a minor league baseball team that was in Calgary from 1985 all the way till 2002 here. And all that time, they were a AAA team, so you were leveled just below the major leagues. They played in the PCL, the Pacific Coast Leagues, at Foothills Stadium here. And I felt at the time that I think Foothills Stadium just barely met the minimum requirements to host the AAA team, but it displaced the Calgary Expos, who played at the rookie level of the Pioneer League. So, and actually, this team, the Calgary Expos, went to Salt Lake City. The Calgary Cannons actually came from Salt Lake City here when they were the Salt Lake City Gulls and the Salt Lake City Angels and the Salt Lake City Bees. So the team spent some time in Salt Lake City before it moved to Calgary here. Eventually, what happened was that the Calgary Cannons eventually moved to Albuquerque, and they're also known as the Isotopes here, where, you know, that's when Canadian cities were losing their AAA team. But yeah, definitely the Calgary Cannons. I definitely remember going to some games when I was very much younger and even a little older here. And I mean, I never was a diehard Cannons fan here, but it definitely was a big deal when we had them in Calgary. And I know my grandparents also went to many games as well. They also had season tickets for the Calgary Flames for many years there before, as you get older and health issues arise. But yeah, I think this is definitely the team that most Calgarians, I mean, I was kind of in that half generation there, but if I was much older, I'd probably have even more fond memories of the Calgary Cannons here. But they played over 2,500 regular season games, and they made the playoffs a few times with 1985, 1987, 1989, 1991. And they also were affiliated with many teams in the major leagues here. Most notably, it would make sense geographically that the Calgary Cannons originally first were the affiliate team for the Seattle Mariners, which is one of the closest cities for the major leagues, as they were the Mariners farm team from 1985 to 1994 here. And then we were affiliated for the Pittsburgh Pirates, which this has started getting wonkier because Pittsburgh is much further away from Calgary, as I figure it would take at least 5-6 hours to fly to some of these cities from Calgary, at least 4 or 5 hours. I mean, Seattle, you can get there in just under a couple hours airport-wise, and if you're calling someone up right away. But Calgary Cannons used to be the Pittsburgh Pirates farm team from 1995 to 1997. Then in 1998, the Calgary Cannons were the farm team for the Chicago White Sox, and then the last years before the team moved to Albuquerque. Actually, they were the Florida Marlins. That was actually one of the teams that I cheered for growing up when they first came in, and I actually enjoyed their World Series from 1997 and 2003. But the Calgary Cannons were the Florida Marlins farm team from 1999 till 2002, so we didn't feed any of the teams when they won their World Series there. But I'm going to say definitely foreign players wore a Cannons jersey. Here's some big names that were Calgary Cannons. Well, A-Rod, Alex Rodriguez actually was a Calgary Cannon when we had the Seattle Mariners farm team. Edgar Martinez, that's another big name. And another great that didn't have the best, he had a Major League Baseball career, but didn't have something big in the Major Leagues. I know he was big for the Cannons, was Danny Tartabull. And then Jim Abbott. Actually, we briefly had Jim Abbott there, the pitcher that only had one hand. He was briefly here. And two pitchers pitched for no-hitters for the Cannons, Frank Willis in 1985 and Eric Hansen in 1988. And Danny Tartabull was the of the professional baseballs who had a 43 home run season. So yeah, Danny Tartabull, you could say, was probably the best Cannon, but you could say Alex Rodriguez, Edgar Martinez. Looking at other players that played, I mean, if I could find the players that on this Wikipedia page, but Cannons in the major leagues here. I'll get to that tab here, but so yeah, I mean, they were definitely the most memorable team, I could say, for the all the teams that played in baseball. I mean, other guys that you could say, well, A.J. Burnett, he was a Cannon, and I believe that's the A.J. Burnett who actually wound up playing for the Blue Jays eventually and the New York Yankees. That was towards the Florida Marlins end of the year. Luis Castillo and Roman Castro. These are guys that they bolded. And you got Ryan Dempster. I remember he played for the Florida Marlins. He's a Canadian pitcher as well. Trying to think of other big names. Well, Derek Lee, I remember he used to play for the Florida Marlins, and I think he was on the 2003 World Series team. Actually, Estevan Loaiza actually was at Canada at one time, and I know that that was one pitcher that played for the White Sox and was actually one of the big free agent signings for the Blue Jays at one time. Then you got Tino Martinez. I remember he had some time with the New York Yankees. And A-Rod, well, you could say what you say about Alex Rodriguez, but he's one of the bigger names when he played in the game there. Omar Vizquel, there's another big name that played for the Calgary Cannons. But here's one what if. Here is one player that's definitely missing from the alumni that if he didn't go straight from high school to the major leagues, Calgary could have had Ken Griffey Jr. Imagine what it would have been like if we had Ken Griffey Jr. playing for the Calgary Cannons if he didn't go straight from high school to the major leagues. Because what made him rare was usually some players that go through the system here. But Ken Griffey Jr. definitely, because Foothills Stadium definitely is a very home run friendly park. I think if Ken Griffey Jr. did spend some time with the Calgary Cannons, as we were the feeder system for the Seattle Mariners, I think he would have ripped the cover of the baseball off and beat Danny Tartabull's home run record if he was a Calgary Cannon, and maybe we would have found some baseballs in McMahon Stadium. So, yeah, I mean, definitely it's the biggest team that, if you're looking back at Calgary baseball memories, that represented Calgary was the Calgary Cannons, but, just, finances, and we definitely don't have a beautiful stadium anymore for AAA teams, because there's definitely much better stadiums in the States that, even house single A teams, but, I definitely do have some memories of the Cannons, but a lot of their great history I was too young, plus also consumed with hockey and football too, so I mean I'm casually a baseball fan and casually watch Major League Baseball, but I'm going to say definitely baseball, just on this level, I definitely would love to go to a Major League Baseball game when I have a chance here, but baseball kind of has that picnic summer atmosphere that is not the same as hockey or football. And also my joke with baseball is it's a lot like being a businessman. You work every day and you live by every pitch. That's pretty much what baseball is. However, after the Calgary Cannons here, we briefly had one team here in a league that briefly existed up until the All-Star game. Remember when we had the Calgary Outlaws? Gotta go back to 2003 here. There was an 18 Canadian baseball league here, and I remember it was promoted on the Score at the time. I mean, it didn't have any major networks here, but they had the Jenkins Cup, which would have been the major trophy that they would have awarded, for Ferguson Jenkins, one of the, I believe he's actually the first Canadian that won the Cy Young Award. But yeah, this league actually lasted until the All-Star game, which actually Calgary hosted the All-Star game and actually had the best record in the league. So in some way, we were, by default, the Calgary Outlaws actually won the championship there, and they played in the Foothills Stadium here. But yeah, we very, very briefly had the Calgary Outlaws here. But Canada seems to be a little harder of a baseball sell just because of the weather, and we're consumed with hockey. And now, the Blue Jays have pretty much been successful because Toronto was one of the bigger markets, and Montreal, they had their team there after 1967. They actually were the first team that went to Canada, and eventually after 2004 they relocated to Washington there just because they had stadium issues and got to the point where nobody was going to games here. But however, maybe within the next 10 years there seems to be appetite for baseball again in Montreal, that maybe we'll see the Expos back. But that's getting off the side there. But yeah, we briefly had the Calgary Outlaws here. So now, go to the final two teams. One team actually still exists. Excuse me. But don't play in Calgary here. But actually, the current Okotoks Dawgs, which is another Western Canadian baseball team that basically they only plays over the summer here and has younger college players here. Well, actually, they first started in Calgary at the same time in 2003, so they shared the stadium with the Outlaws there, but the Outlaws didn't last long, and they played at Foothills Stadium here. However, in 2005, when the Vipers came in, there was kind of a pissing matchup about sharing the stadium with the Vipers and the Dawgs here. So eventually the Okotoks Dawgs, or the Calgary Dawgs at the time, they relocated down to Okotoks, which is about 15 to 20 kilometers south of Calgary here. And actually, the Okotoks Dawgs have been embraced in the Okotoks community, as the Doc Seaman brothers bought funded Seaman Stadium, and Seaman Stadium that is definitely a nice, beautiful 2,000 seat stadium there that I believe it holds at least 2,000 seats. And I've never been to a Okotoks Dawgs game, but Okotoks is definitely don't have a vehicle and it's far out of the way, so it's definitely a long way south there, and it's hard to go down there just for a baseball game, especially where I live in the northern part of the city here. But it's definitely been embraced, and actually what it highlights here for the Okotoks Dawgs here, that there was I think there was one player that played for a couple players that played in the major leagues eventually, while Jim Henderson has gone to play in the major leagues, and he made his debut with the Milwaukee Brewers in 2012 here. And then there was a catcher named Jordan Prochelin who was drafted by the Boston Red Sox here. So a couple players eventually got to major leagues with the Okotoks Dawgs here, and they've won 5 league championships. They won in 2004 as the Calgary Dawgs, and then 07, 08, 09, and most recently 2019. So the Okotoks Dawgs definitely have won 5 championships here. And then the last team, the Calgary Vipers, they were in Calgary from 2005 till 2011 here. They first started off in the Northern League from the first 3 years that they played in the Northern League, and then they played in the Arizona Winter League as well here. But yeah, the Calgary Vipers, they worked out to be the last, or should say they were in the Northern League. They also were in the Arizona Winter League for a couple years, but then the last years they were in the Golden League here before they were just an independent team, in 2011 there. And that was actually the season that I went and caught a dozen games there, and it was definitely a nice summer that year, and sitting out in the sun there. But yeah, eventually the Calgary Vipers they just folded and fell off the face of the earth after the 2011 season there, as there were financial difficulties, and I remember the website just certainly just didn't exist anymore, and players that played on that team, got trouble with actually getting paid, towards the end of the year there. But the crowds were very thin there. Foothills Stadium, actually one time when the Cannons were here, was actually called Burns Stadium, was named after Burns' meat there. But that stadium that we have in Calgary, it's still there, but it's definitely falling apart, and I think it's time to knock it down because it's not being used anymore, because you don't have any more baseball teams after the Vipers. But they used to only get a couple thousand at a game, and if the weather was crappy and if the game was during the week, you were lucky to get 1,000. So I always wondered, how did the Vipers actually made money and stayed viable? Well, my question was definitely answered after the 2011 season there. But it was just independent baseball. There were a few more former major leaguers that were managers, and it was just a different route to go to maybe get exposure to eventually get to the big leagues. I don't know any former Vipers, and didn't see any Wikipedia page that eventually made it to the major leagues. But I do remember in the 2011 season that one of the teams, the Yuma Scorpions, was managed by this guy named Jose Canseco. Yeah, that same Jose Canseco that formerly played in the major leagues, and he actually was a player. So actually, because I went to Vipers games, he was 47, I think, at the time, back in 2011. So I actually got to see Jose Canseco here at Calgary and Foothills Stadium. Made a few at bats, and actually there was one game that I wasn't at this game, but I remember Jose Canseco when we were playing the Yuma Scorpions, that they were out of pitchers, and actually Jose Canseco actually pitched. So he definitely did it all for the Yuma Scorpions there, and yeah, it was just definitely a little surreal to be in an independent baseball league, and just Calgary Vipers, and you see Jose Canseco there, and so I definitely got to see him play live, not in the way that I would ever imagine seeing Jose Canseco play live, but I could say I did that. It was towards the twilight of his career, or after long his baseball career was done, and he definitely took some criticism because he definitely opened the can of worms, because he wrote that juice book, and that's when the steroid era came to be, where he admitted taking steroids, and he definitely threw some players on the bus there. But that's another story there. But definitely it was still surreal to see Jose Canseco here in Calgary going to bat. So those are some of my Calgary baseball memories, just looking back at some teams that represent baseball in Calgary, and don't think I'm going to be seeing any baseball in Calgary anytime soon here, because we don't use the biggest baseball stadium we have here. And well, I think it's time to knock it down, and just with the crazy weather and that, it's kind of hard to have baseball during the traditional baseball season here, because if we were to ever have a baseball team, we would need an indoor stadium, so we don't have any games that get rained out or even snowed out here. But as I say, what are your Calgary baseball memories here? Do you have any fond memories from those teams that I mentioned? Even if you're in Okotoks, do you have any memories from the Okotoks Dawgs or the Calgary Dawgs? But I think the Calgary Cannons is definitely the team that's most synonymous with baseball in Calgary here, and that's when we were the AAA team for a feeder team for, I mentioned the Seattle Mariners, Chicago White Sox, and the Florida Marlins here. Now they're the Miami Marlins, but they were originally the Florida Marlins there. But that's just kind of my little bit of baseball memories in Calgary. Figured just want to put one out there for a personal blog, but of course, if you enjoy everything I do on my YouTube channel, just make sure you hit like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon to follow along here. I do personal blog. There's a case where I had a kind of a personal blog where I talked about Calgary sports in the past there, but I mostly talk Calgary sports with the Flames, Hitmen, Roughnecks, and Stampeders there. So that sounds like you like to do. Just make sure you like subscribe. But I also have attempt at comedy and much more on my channel, and everything's on playlist here. So as I always say, I'll see you in the next video here.